It started with the kind of silence that didn't feel empty, just too still. The bathroom light hummed softly above the mirror, a weak fluorescent bulb that flickered every few seconds like it was struggling to stay alive. I could hear the faint buzz it made, mixing with the slow drip of water from the faucet. The kind of sound that echoes slightly, the way water does when it hits porcelain. I had been brushing my teeth, leaning lazily over the sink, watching my own reflection through a fogged mirror. It was late, past midnight, I think, and the rest of the house had already gone dark. I could feel the quiet pressing in from the hallway. The air was cold, not freezing, but heavy and unmoving. There was something about brushing your teeth in that kind of silence that made every small sound louder. The scrape of the toothbrush against enamel, the creak of the bathroom floorboards beneath bare feet, even the faint hum of the vent. I wasn't thinking about anything, just letting the night drag on. Then I saw it, a movement, behind me. It wasn't quick like a flash or a trick of the eye. It was slow, purposeful, a shape darker than the room itself, sliding from the hallway across the reflection in the mirror. I felt the air shift when it moved, just enough for the fine hairs on my arms to rise. For a moment, I froze, toothbrush halfway out of my mouth, foam dripping from the corner of my lips. I stared into the mirror, trying to process what I had just seen. Nothing. The hallway behind me looked exactly as it always did, empty, still, quiet. Just the outline of the doorway leading into a stretch of black. But I knew what I saw. It wasn't my own shadow. The angle was wrong. The light was too direct, too flat. My silhouette couldn't have stretched that far, and it couldn't have moved like that, fluid, almost gliding. Something passed behind me. I spat the toothpaste into the sink and let the water run, but I didn't move. I kept watching the mirror. My heart had started to beat harder, not fast, just heavier, each thump echoing in my chest. After a few seconds, I turned around. The hallway yawned open into the dark, the kind of dark that looks thicker than usual, where shapes blend into one another and shadows start to seem alive. The door at the end of the hallway was closed, like always, but I could swear the air had changed. There was a faint scent now, something faintly metallic, not strong enough to name, but sharp enough to notice. I turned the bathroom light off for a moment, just to see. The darkness swallowed everything instantly. The mirror went black, and my own reflection disappeared. For a brief second, I thought I saw movement again, something pulling back into the hall. When I flicked the light back on, it was gone. I told myself it was just the flicker of the bulb. The way fluorescent light plays tricks when your eyes are tired. I rinsed my mouth, splashed water on my face, and leaned forward against the counter, trying to shake off the unease. But even with my head down, I could feel something standing behind me. Not close enough to touch, but close enough that I felt aware of it, like static in the air. The mirror fogged again, just slightly from my breathing. And in that blur, I thought I saw something forming, just a hint of another outline, faint and dark, standing where no one should be. I didn't move for a long time. The light flickered again, humming louder this time. The drip from the faucet sped up, almost rhythmic. And in that rhythm, I started to notice something strange. Every time the droplet hit the sink, there was a faint sound underneath it, something like a breath, quick and shallow. I shut off the water. The sound didn't stop. It was right behind me now. A slow inhale, then another. I turned around so fast I nearly slipped on the tile. But there was nothing, just the open hall, stretching out into a darkness that looked too deep for such a small house. The metallic smell was stronger now, and cold. I could feel it on the back of my throat. That was the first night. After that, it kept happening. Not every night, but often enough to know it wasn't coincidence. I'd see it again, always in that same mirror. Never directly, never with light from anywhere else. Just there, behind me in the reflection. Sometimes standing, sometimes moving. Always just out of focus. It never stayed long. Just a few seconds of motion, enough to make my stomach drop, then gone before I could turn around. I tried to catch it once. I set my phone on the counter and hit record, pretending not to look while brushing my teeth. The reflection stayed normal for almost 2 minutes. I even laughed at myself a little. But then, toward the end of the video, the frame darkened. The light dimmed for a fraction of a second, and when it came back, there was a shape behind me, just barely visible. It was tall, but not human in the way a person is. The shoulders were wrong. The head was too low. Its outline looked like it was made from the absence of light itself. When I checked the hallway, it was empty, but my phone stopped recording on its own. It had shut off mid-frame, as if something drained the battery. After that, the bathroom didn't feel like a bathroom anymore. It felt like something else was using it when I wasn't there. I'd find the mirror fogged even when the room had been empty all day. Once, I found the toothbrush on the floor, bristles still damp though I hadn't used it since morning. I started brushing my teeth in the kitchen, but it followed me there too. The kitchen window had a faint reflection at night when the outside was black. And one night, while standing at the sink, I saw it again, this time outside beyond the glass. Not in the yard, not quite. More like on the reflection itself. It moved just the same way as before. Slow, deliberate. And then I realized something that made my stomach turn. Every time I saw it, it was closer to me. In the first reflection, it was far back, almost in the doorway. The second time, nearer to the mirror's edge. And now, in the kitchen glass, it was directly behind my shoulder. That was the night I stopped turning off the lights. Days started to blur together after that. Sleep came in short bursts. I'd catch glimpses of movement in the corners of rooms where shadows should have been still. The sound of soft footsteps on tile when no one else was home. Sometimes I'd wake in the middle of the night and see the bathroom light already on, humming quietly, as if something had been standing in front of the mirror again. Once, I went in and found faint streaks on the mirror, marks that looked like handprints, but longer. The surface was smudged in a way that made it hard to breathe just looking at it. It was always behind me now. Even when I didn't see it, I could feel it there. Watching, waiting for me to look again. The strange part is, it never did anything. It never moved toward me, never made a sound beyond breathing and faint shifts in air pressure. But the longer it lingered, the more the house itself began to change. The shadows in the corners grew thicker. The air carried that metallic scent even during the day. And sometimes, in complete silence, I could hear faint dripping sounds from the bathroom, even though the faucet was off. I thought about moving out, but I knew it wouldn't matter. Whatever it was, whatever had first crossed behind me in that mirror, it wasn't tied to this place anymore. It had followed. Now, even when I brush my teeth in someone else's house, in a hotel, anywhere with a mirror, I catch it again. Just for a second, a faint blur, a darker patch of space, always moving behind me, always watching. And the worst part, lately, it's been waiting until I stopped looking at the mirror, until I glance down at the sink, and then I see its reflection move forward, like it's finally stepping closer. I don't look anymore when I brush my teeth. I can't, because one day soon, I know if I do, it won't be behind me. It'll be standing next to me, staring back through the glass. It started on a quiet night. The kind of night where the air feels heavy for no reason, where every sound outside your window stretches longer than it should. I remember the clock on my wall ticking faintly, steady, rhythmic, like a pulse. Everything else in my apartment was still. The mirror in my bathroom had always been ordinary. Just a simple rectangle fixed above the sink, framed by dull chrome that had started to corrode at the edges. I had lived with it for years, used it every morning and night without a second thought. But lately, I'd started to notice something strange about it. It began as nothing more than a feeling. That faint, skin-tight pull you get when you know someone is watching. I'd look up from brushing my teeth and feel off. Not scared, just uneasy. Like the reflection of the room wasn't perfectly still. Like the shadows shifted a half-second slower than they should have. I told myself it was the flickering light above the sink. The bulb was old, and sometimes the current made it buzz. But there were moments when the flicker seemed intentional, slow, deliberate, as though something was moving between the light and the mirror's surface. That night, the one that I can't stop replaying, the air in the bathroom felt wrong. Thick, humid, almost oily. The window had been shut tight for days, but the air carried a smell that reminded me of wet concrete and rust. I stood barefoot on the cold tiles, toothbrush in hand, the sound of soft bristles and water echoing unnaturally loud. When I looked up, I caught it. A shape. Not a reflection of me, not even a trick of the light. It was something darker, sliding across the back of the mirror like smoke under glass. It didn't resemble anything human at first. It was just a distortion, like a shadow had learned how to breathe. It moved from left to right in a single, fluid motion, gliding just beneath the surface. I froze. My first instinct was to turn around, but I didn't. Some part of me knew there would be nothing there. The mirror showed movement. The room behind me was still. The shape disappeared as quickly as it came. I blinked hard, stepped closer, trying to find logic in the faint fog of my own breath on the glass. The reflection was normal again. Just my pale face, eyes wide, the steady drip of water from the faucet below. But something about the mirror didn't feel like a reflection anymore. It felt like a window. I stood there for minutes, waiting, watching. The clock in the living room ticked through the walls, distant and steady. I could almost time my heartbeat to it. Then it moved again. This time slower, so slow that I could see the faint edges of it, like the suggestion of limbs. It wasn't walking or crawling. It was sliding, almost melting from one side to the other, the way oil moves on water. The lights dimmed slightly as it passed, though the bulb itself didn't flicker. It was as if the room had drawn in a breath and held it. I felt the pressure change. My ears popped faintly. The temperature dropped just enough for goosebumps to rise along my arms. I could hear nothing but the sound of my own breathing, and beneath that, something faint. A hum. It came from the mirror. A low, vibrating note that seemed to pulse through the glass. Not loud, but deep, enough to make my teeth ache. I leaned forward, eyes fixed on the surface. The shape had stopped moving. It lingered in the corner of the mirror, just barely visible, a faint, black shimmer against the reflection of my own body. I couldn't tell if it was behind me or inside. My own reflection looked wrong now. The light caught my eyes differently. My movements felt delayed, as though the mirror was hesitating to follow me. When I lifted my hand, the reflection lingered a split second longer before mirroring the gesture. The hum grew louder. I could see tiny vibrations running across the surface of the water in the sink, disturbed by the sound no one else could hear. Then the power went out. Everything went black except for the faint, ghostly glow from the streetlight bleeding through the frosted window. The mirror still reflected something, but it wasn't me anymore. There was movement, slow, deliberate, emerging from the dark edge of the glass. I could make out a head, shoulders, not a person exactly, but a silhouette so dense that it swallowed the light around it. It stood there, still as a shadow that refused to belong to anything. The hum stopped. The silence after was suffocating. I don't know how long I stood there staring. Time didn't seem to exist in that moment. My body was locked, every nerve straining against the impossible stillness. Then, without sound or motion, the shadow turned. It didn't walk, it just pivoted within the mirror, slowly facing my direction. And then it looked at me. I don't know how I knew that. There were no eyes, no features at all. But I felt its attention like a weight pressing against my chest. Every breath I took came harder, heavier. My pulse thundered in my ears. The mirror began to fog from my breath, but the shape didn't fade. It was inside the mist now, like it had been waiting for the condensation to form. It reached toward the glass, not outward, inward, like it was pulling something deeper into itself. The fog distorted around its arm as if the reflection were bending. And then I saw movement behind me in the mirror, a flash of motion that didn't exist in the real room. I turned so fast I almost slipped on the tile. Nothing. Empty air. When I looked back, the shadow was gone. The mirror was clear again, perfectly normal, reflecting the dull blue light from outside. But the hum lingered. Faint, barely audible now, like a memory still vibrating in the bones of the room. For days after that, the mirror seemed wrong. I avoided looking into it directly, brushing my teeth with my head turned slightly away. But even from the corner of my eye, I could see subtle movements that shouldn't be there, tiny, almost imperceptible shifts, like something pacing just beneath the glass. I tried covering it with a towel once. The next morning, the towel was on the floor. Not fallen, folded neatly beneath the sink. Sometimes, when I walked by at night, I could swear I saw faint smudges on the surface, handprints pressed from the inside. Weeks passed. The feeling of being watched grew stronger, not just in the bathroom, but throughout the apartment. Shadows pooled in corners that should have been empty. I started hearing faint knocks from inside the walls. Always 3 at a time. Always when I was alone. The mirror became the center of it all. I could feel it, like a low static field that filled the space around it. One night I decided to move it. I took it down carefully, lifting it off the wall hook. The instant it left the wall, the humming stopped completely. The silence was almost deafening. I felt relief flood through me. For a moment, I actually laughed. Then, from the dark surface of the mirror, a faint pulse of light shimmered. Not a reflection. A glow coming from within. It flickered once, twice, and then I saw it again. The same shape, only clearer this time. It stood inside the mirror, pressed against the glass, face close to where mine would have been. Its form trembled like a ripple frozen mid-motion. And just before the glow faded, I saw something that froze me completely. Its hand was on the inside of the glass, and it was moving, slowly, pushing. I dropped the mirror. It hit the floor, shattering into 6 jagged pieces that scattered across the tiles. But as the shards settled, I saw it again, its reflection in every single fragment. Each piece showed the same figure, staring back at me from a slightly different angle, and every version of it was closer. I ran. I didn't even stop to grab my keys. The hum followed me down the hallway, faint but there, vibrating through the walls. That was months ago. I haven't gone back since. The landlord said they'd found the mirror in the apartment when cleaning it out. He thought it was strange that every shard seemed to have a faint scorch mark along the edge. He asked if I wanted it returned. I told him to throw it away. But sometimes, when I wake up in the middle of the night, I swear I can still hear that hum. Soft, distant, like it's coming from somewhere down the hall. And once, when I passed by the bathroom of my new place, I caught a glimpse of myself in the mirror. Only I wasn't moving, but something behind me was. I never thought much about mirrors. They were just there, silent, flat, and obedient. Until one day, mine stopped being obedient. It stopped following me. It began with something small. A subtle wrongness that I couldn't quite name. You know that uneasy feeling when your eyes catch movement in the corner of a mirror, but when you look directly, everything's still? That's how it started. Except, it didn't stop when I looked straight at it. The mirror in question wasn't even new. It hung in my hallway, tall and narrow, framed in dark wood that had probably seen decades of dust. When I moved into the apartment, I left it there because taking it down seemed like too much effort. The frame had tiny scratches, little grooves where the varnish had flaked away. I remember thinking it gave the place some character. Now I wish I had thrown it out the first day. It was late afternoon, that hour where the light looks weak and uncertain, stretching long shadows across the walls. I was walking past the mirror when I noticed something off about my reflection. At first, it was just the timing. I turned my head, but the reflection didn't. I stopped. The air felt heavier, like the whole room had shifted slightly, the way it does right before a storm. I stared at myself, trying to convince my mind that I had just blinked, or maybe the glass had warped over time. But the reflection was staring too, except not at me. It was looking just past me, to my left, at something that wasn't there. I tried to dismiss it, but every time I walked by, something new felt wrong. Sometimes it lagged a fraction of a second behind. Sometimes its expression didn't match mine. One evening, its mouth twitched upward into a smile when mine didn't move at all. I could almost hear the faint creak of the floor beneath its feet. Not mine, its. The wood in my hallway has this dry, hollow groan when pressure shifts on it. I knew that sound too well. And that night, I heard it twice. After that, I avoided the hallway as much as I could. I'd keep the lights dim, sometimes even take the longer route around the apartment, just so I wouldn't have to walk past it. But avoidance doesn't erase things, it only gives them time to wait. One night, around 2 a.m., I woke up to a soft tapping. It came from the direction of the hallway, sharp and deliberate, like fingernails against glass. I didn't want to get up. I just lay there, breathing shallowly, convincing myself it was the pipes or maybe a mouse. But the tapping became rhythmic, almost curious. I finally got out of bed and walked toward the noise, my bare feet whispering across the cold floor. The hallway was darker than usual, even though I'd left a small night light plugged in. The air felt cold and oddly stale, like no one had walked through it in years. When I reached the mirror, the tapping stopped, and I realized something. The reflection wasn't matching my breathing. I leaned closer, my breath fogging the glass slightly. The fog spread, distorting the image for a moment, and when it cleared, the reflection hadn't changed. I had stepped back. It hadn't. The thing inside the glass tilted its head, slowly, deliberately, like it was studying me for the first time. The corners of its mouth twitched, the same faint smile from before. Something deep inside me screamed to move, but I couldn't. It blinked, and I swear I heard the soft, wet sound of it echoing faintly from behind the glass. That night, I dragged an old sheet from my closet and covered the mirror completely. I tried to sleep after that, but even in the dark, I kept feeling like something was moving just beyond my eyelids. The house made small, irregular noises, creaks, soft pops in the walls, the sigh of wind slipping through the cracks. But one sound stood out, a slow slide like fabric brushing over wood. The next morning, the sheet was on the floor, perfectly folded. It's strange how quickly fear becomes routine. I started avoiding mirrors entirely, not just that one. I covered the bathroom mirror too, even the one on my wardrobe door. I started washing my face in the kitchen sink, where there was no reflection. It felt ridiculous, but the relief I felt was real. For a while, it seemed to work. Then one morning, I noticed my reflection again, in the microwave door. It was smiling. I unplugged the microwave, turned it around, and sat on the floor for a long time. My hands were shaking so badly, I could hear the rustle of my own skin. I told myself I was imagining it, that it was all exhaustion, maybe even sleep deprivation. But deep down, I knew it wasn't that simple. Because when I blinked, I saw its eyes move independently of mine, just a flicker, but enough. After that, the boundaries between reflection and reality started to blur. Sometimes, I'd catch glimpses of movement in the reflective surface of picture frames, or even the polished metal of door handles. Shadows that didn't belong. Slight gestures, fingers curling, eyes darting, a head tilting just a little too far. Always watching, always moving when I didn't. One evening, as I passed through the hallway again, the light flickered. I froze, because for a split second, the sheet over the mirror seemed to bulge outward, like something behind it had shifted closer to the surface. There was a faint outline, almost human, pressing against the fabric. It stayed like that for several seconds. Then slowly it flattened again. The silence afterward was deafening. I decided to leave the apartment the next day. I didn't pack much, just essentials. But before I left, I had to walk past the mirror one last time. I told myself not to look. Of course I did. The sheet was gone, and my reflection was standing closer than it should have been. The background behind it wasn't my hallway anymore. It looked darker, deeper, like the reflection wasn't showing my world at all, but a different one. The air in front of the glass shimmered faintly, as if there was heat radiating off it. My reflection tilted its head again, the same unnatural slowness, the same awful calm. Then it raised a hand and placed it against the inside of the glass. A faint smudge bloomed there, from the other side. I stepped back. It pressed harder. The glass groaned, a hairline crack spreading outward like a spiderweb. I could hear it, that soft whine of glass under pressure. Then, just as suddenly, it stopped. The reflection smiled one last time, and its hand slid downward, leaving a long streak of condensation across the inside of the mirror. Then it stepped back, out of view. I moved out that same day. The movers wrapped the mirror in thick paper and tape without me asking. I didn't watch. I just signed the forms and left. The apartment felt lighter without it, but I never truly felt free. Because reflections are everywhere. Elevator doors, windows at night, even puddles after the rain. Sometimes when I walk by, I catch myself looking, just to make sure everything's normal. But sometimes I see it. A flicker of something standing just behind me, moving, even when I don't. And lately, it's been getting closer. The first time the light flickered, I thought it was just the bulb. Old house wiring, maybe, nothing unusual. But the second time it happened, the air felt different. Heavy, like the entire bathroom had inhaled and was holding its breath. I had been standing over the sink, brushing my teeth, when the fluorescent light overhead began to buzz. A faint, high-pitched hum, the kind that crawls into the back of your skull and stays there. The reflection in the mirror wavered slightly, as though water were rippling just beneath the surface of the glass. I remember stopping mid-motion, the toothbrush hanging limp in my hand. The smell of toothpaste, mint, cold and sharp, suddenly felt nauseating in the air. I watched the mirror, watched myself, waiting for the light to steady again. When it did, I almost laughed. Almost. But then the shadow moved. It wasn't mine. I knew that instantly. I was still, absolutely still. Yet something dark and shapeless slid across the back of the reflection, just behind me, where the doorway should have been empty. No sound, no draft, just movement, When I turned, the doorway was clear. The hall beyond was silent, the faint hum of the refrigerator from the kitchen barely audible. My own reflection, when I looked back, stared at me with wide eyes, mine yet not quite. There was something in them, something uncertain. The light flickered again. For a moment, everything seemed to blink, like reality itself faltered. My reflection's head tilted slightly before I did. I noticed it. I know I did. It was subtle, almost imperceptible, but it was there. The light steadied again, and my reflection snapped back into perfect alignment with me. I didn't sleep that night. The next morning, the bathroom felt colder. Not cool cold, damp, like a cellar floor after rain. The tiles beneath my feet were slick, as though condensation had formed overnight. I leaned against the sink, running the water to splash my face, but even the water came out with an odd smell, metallic, like old coins soaked in something stale. I didn't look directly into the mirror that morning. I couldn't. I brushed my teeth with my head slightly down, just enough to catch a glimpse of movement in the corner of my eye if it happened again. It didn't. Not that morning. But when I left for work, I glanced back once, and there, faintly visible on the glass, right where my reflection should have been, was a smudge. A handprint, pressed from the inside. For days, I avoided using that bathroom at night. I'd brush my teeth in the kitchen sink, sometimes even wash up there before bed. It felt foolish, but every time I passed that door, every time I saw the faint line of light beneath it, I felt something watching, waiting. There's something different about the dark in bathrooms. It feels close, like it wraps around you instead of simply filling the space. The tiles echo your movements, the light reflects endlessly, walls, mirror, chrome faucet, until it all feels too much, too reflective. On the fourth night, I forgot myself. It was late, past 2 a.m. I'd been half asleep when I walked in, the weight of drowsiness dulling my usual caution. I turned on the light. It flickered, of course, but I ignored it, until I saw the mirror. There was moisture on the glass again, though I hadn't showered in hours. A thin fog, spreading from the edges toward the center. Slowly, something began to form on it. Not a handprint this time, something longer, streaked, dragging, like fingers being drawn across the surface from the inside. The sound that followed wasn't loud. It was soft, wet, a faint squeal of skin against glass. And then, from behind me, the light flickered twice. My reflection should have followed, but it didn't. It kept moving, kept brushing its hand across the fogged mirror. My own hand hung still at my side, trembling. The light snapped off entirely. I was plunged into darkness, so complete that for a second I thought I'd gone blind. My breathing echoed, harsh, uneven, and in the blackness, I could still hear it. That soft, dragging sound. Only this time, it wasn't from the mirror. It was from the wall beside me. When the light flickered back on, the mirror was clear again. No fog, no prints, just my reflection staring back, pale and trembling. But something about it looked delayed. The blink came a half second too late. It became routine after that. The flicker, the shadow, the reflection that never quite matched me anymore. I tried to replace the bulb, thinking maybe it was electrical interference. I called an electrician. He checked everything, said the wiring was fine. When I asked about the light flickering, he said he never saw it happen. Of course he didn't. It only happened when I was alone. I tried covering the mirror once, hung a towel over it before bed. The next morning, the towel was on the floor, wet. The mirror? Perfectly clean. Too clean, as if it had been wiped down from the inside. There's a smell that's hard to describe, a blend of damp earth and rust. That's what began to fill the air every night around that time. It would start faint, somewhere near the sink, then thicken until it clung to the back of my throat. I started keeping the door shut. Sometimes I'd hear a faint hum coming from behind it, not mechanical, more like breathing through the walls. I didn't go in for 3 days straight once. When I finally did, the bulb had burned out completely, and across the mirror, faintly scratched into the glass from the inside, were marks. Dozens of them. Parallel lines, uneven claw-like. Some trailed down to the sink where tiny flecks of dark rust, or something that looked too much like dried blood, had gathered. There's a strange thing that happens when you stare into a mirror too long. The edges of your face blur. The shadows around your eyes deepen. And after a while, the reflection stops feeling like you at all. That's what it was like every night from then on. Even when I avoided looking, I could feel it, waiting for me to meet its gaze again. Sometimes, the light would flicker even when the door was closed. I could see it from the hallway, a faint pulse of light leaking beneath the doorframe. Each flicker timed almost like breathing. Once, I pressed my ear to the door just to listen. Something moved inside. Not water pipes, not a draft, something with weight. Slow, deliberate, like bare feet shifting across tile. When I turned the knob, the light went out again. The silence that followed was worse than the sound. It was so complete it made my heartbeat feel deafening. I didn't open the door. I moved out 3 months later. Left most of my things behind, even the mirror. Especially the mirror. The landlord said he'd take care of the cleanup. I never told him why the bathroom light never worked anymore, or why there were scratches on the inside of the glass. I didn't want to know what he'd see if he looked long enough. But sometimes, when I wake up late at night in my new apartment, I'll see it. Just for a moment. A flicker. A pulse of dim light from the bathroom down the hall. And when I go to check, the bulb is steady, the room quiet. The mirror reflects perfectly, except for the faintest outline of something standing just behind me. Too tall, too still. It fades when I blink. But I know it's there. And every time the light buzzes, just for a heartbeat, I see movement ripple across the reflection's surface again. Like something on the other side is waiting for the right moment to come through. And I know it will, because the light always flickers before it does, and the shadow always passes through. I used to think mirrors were harmless. Just flat, silent things, reflective surfaces meant to bounce back the world at you. Nothing more, nothing less. But that belief changed one night, in the quiet stillness of my apartment bathroom, when I realized that what looks back from a mirror doesn't always wait for you to move first. It started on a Thursday night, one of those evenings when everything feels unnervingly still. The air hung heavy, not from heat, but from the kind of stagnant quiet that presses against your ears. I remember the faint hum of the refrigerator bleeding through the hallway, the way my floorboards gave off a faint wooden groan whenever I shifted my weight. The apartment felt alive in its silence, like something was breathing just beneath the walls. I had been brushing my teeth, the repetitive scrape of bristles filling the small bathroom. The light above the mirror buzzed faintly, one of those old bulbs that always threatens to die but never quite does. Its glow was a sickly yellow, washing everything in a tired color that made my skin look pale and almost waxy. Steam still clung to the mirror from a recent shower. I reached up and wiped it away with the back of my hand, leaving streaks across the glass. For a moment, the reflection looked normal. Me tired, eyes slightly bloodshot, skin pale under that old fluorescent light. The same face I'd seen 1,000 times before. But the longer I looked, the less it felt like I was looking at myself. There was a moment, barely a second, when I could have sworn the reflection blinked slower than I did. Just slightly off. My own eyelids had opened, but in the glass, mine were still shut, lingering, delayed. It was such a small thing, the kind of discrepancy your mind could write off as imagination. I told myself it was fatigue, maybe the way the light flickered. I leaned closer, studying the reflection. My own breath fogged the mirror again, and for a fraction of a second, the figure inside looked like it was standing just a step too close. When I wiped it again, it was gone, back to normal. I spat the toothpaste into the sink, turned the faucet, and let the water run longer than I needed to. The pipes groaned somewhere deep within the walls, their moans stretching through the still air. I could smell the faint metallic scent of water, mixed with something else, something stale like damp wood. It wasn't until I reached for the towel that I noticed it again. I turned slightly to my right to grab it from the rack, and out of the corner of my eye, the reflection didn't move. My body shifted, but the one in the glass stayed perfectly still, shoulders rigid, head unmoving. I froze mid-motion, staring straight ahead now. The reflection had caught up, aligning itself perfectly with me again, standing the same way I did. I waited. Nothing. Just my pale, trembling reflection staring back. The hum of the bathroom light was the only sound left. I stood there for what felt like minutes, trying to shake the unease that crept under my skin. Finally, I forced myself to turn off the light and step out. Darkness swallowed the hallway. The faint glow from the bathroom bulb leaked under the door behind me, painting a thin line across the floorboards. I told myself not to look back, but I did. The mirror was still faintly visible through the crack in the door, a dim shimmer of glass and shadow. And for a brief second, long enough for my eyes to focus, I saw it. The reflection still standing there, still watching. I closed the door. Hard. That night, sleep didn't come easily. I kept hearing sounds from the bathroom, soft taps like water droplets that never stopped. Every creak of the pipes made my body tense. Around 3 in the morning, I got up to check, convincing myself that it was nothing, that I just needed to see the empty mirror again to calm down. The air was cold as I stepped inside. The light was still on. I hadn't realized I'd left it that way. The mirror waited, silent, reflective, too still. My own face stared back, bleary and exhausted. I touched the cold porcelain of the sink, grounding myself. Then slowly I lifted my gaze again. My reflection smiled. It wasn't wide. It wasn't grotesque. Just wrong. A faint curl of lips that I didn't make. I could feel every muscle in my face locked in stillness. But there it was, in the mirror, my mouth twitching upward. A smile without warmth. The air felt colder suddenly, pressing against my skin, crawling up my arms like static. Then, without warning, the figure in the mirror turned. It wasn't fast. It didn't jerk. It simply turned to the side, like a person deciding to walk away. My real body stayed rooted in place, frozen. But the reflection, it began to step back, away from the glass. I could see the edges of its form fading into the darker parts of the mirror, like the reflection was retreating into a space behind the glass, somewhere deeper, hidden. I couldn't breathe. Its movements grew smaller as it receded, the dim outline of its back fading, dissolving into a murky gray. The last thing I saw was the faint glint of its eyes before the surface stilled again, reflecting only the dim light of the bathroom. I don't know how long I stood there. My hands trembled violently, and my throat felt raw though I hadn't said a word. The mirror looked normal again, but the air didn't feel normal. It felt hollow, lighter, almost emptied. When I turned away, I couldn't shake the feeling that something was missing. Not from the room, but from me. Like something had been mirrored for too long and decided to stop imitating. For the next few days, I avoided the bathroom mirror. I used the one in my bedroom instead, the small, round one with a wooden frame. It felt safer, less alive, but even that comfort didn't last. One morning, while dressing for work, I caught a glimpse of motion in it. Just a flicker behind me. I turned fast, expecting to see movement, maybe a shadow through the curtains, but there was nothing. The light outside was pale and cold, the kind of morning light that makes everything look drained of color. Then I saw it again, in the mirror. Far in the background of the reflection, where my hallway should have been empty, something was moving. A silhouette, just barely there, gray and blurred, walking down the hall. I turned again, and the hallway behind me was completely empty. When I faced the mirror once more, it was gone. I couldn't tell anymore what was real. The mirrors started to feel like windows, and every time I passed one, I had to fight the urge to look too long. The fear wasn't that I'd see something new. It was that I'd see myself doing something I hadn't done yet. That night, I covered every mirror in my apartment with sheets. Every one except the bathroom. I don't even know why. Maybe some part of me thought if I faced it directly, it would stop. The bathroom smelled of mildew and cold water. I stood in front of the mirror again, the one that had betrayed me first. The glass was dim, faintly speckled from moisture. I could see only a vague outline of myself. I leaned in closer, trying to see if anything moved in the darkness of the reflection. Nothing. Just me. For a while. Then from deep inside the glass, I saw movement again. A faint figure walking forward this time, emerging from the depths, growing clearer. The shape of a body, shoulders slouched, head tilted slightly downward. It stopped at the same distance I stood, perfectly aligned. And then it smiled again. But this time, it wasn't me. The face had my features, but the expression belonged to something else entirely, an imitation stretched too thin. I stepped back, heart hammering. The reflection didn't. It stayed where it was. Then slowly, it lifted a hand to the glass. I could see every detail, the faint tremor of its fingers, the glisten of moisture on its skin, as if it had come from somewhere wet, somewhere deeper. It pressed its palm flat against the inside of the mirror. I didn't move, but I could feel the faint vibration under my feet, the hum of pipes, the sound of something moving through them, like air being pushed where it shouldn't go. The light above began to flicker. In the last pulse of dim illumination, I saw the reflection move again, this time stepping forward, its face nearly pressing against the glass. The bulb buzzed violently, and for a heartbeat, the light went out completely. When it came back on, the mirror was empty. No reflection, just the empty bathroom behind me, pale and bare. I looked down, half expecting to see my own shadow against the floor, but there was nothing there either. The air smelled of dampness again, stronger this time, mixed with something faintly metallic, like rusted metal or old blood. And then I heard it. Footsteps. Behind the wall. Slow, dragging, moving away. Not inside the room. Inside the mirror. I stood there for minutes, hours maybe, waiting for my reflection to come back. But it never did. When I finally moved, my legs barely worked. I turned to leave the bathroom, glancing one last time at the glass. In that final moment, as my hand touched the door handle, I saw something faint shimmer at the edge of the mirror's surface. A shadow, walking away. Before I did, I covered the mirror after seeing something crawl across it. That sentence sounds ridiculous when I say it out loud, but I need you to understand. It wasn't my reflection. It wasn't a trick of light, or a dream, or sleep paralysis. I was fully awake, and the thing I saw didn't belong to me, or to this side of the glass. It began on a quiet evening in late November, when the air in my apartment had turned heavy with that dry, static stillness that only winter can bring. The kind of stillness that hums faintly, like the whole world is holding its breath. I'd been living alone for a few months by then, in a small studio unit that used to be part of an old building downtown. My bathroom mirror was wide, almost too wide for the wall it hung on. One of those outdated slabs of glass with beveled edges, slightly warped by age. The mirror had always felt wrong to me. The reflection never looked quite true. The light bulbs above it flickered sometimes, not enough to replace them, but enough to make every reflection shiver and stretch in subtle, nauseating ways. I used to brush my teeth quickly, eyes down, avoiding that glass rectangle as much as possible. That night, though, I couldn't help but look. It started with a sound. A faint, wet tick coming from the sink. Not the usual drip of a leaky faucet. This was slower, deliberate. I leaned in to check, and that's when I noticed movement at the edge of my vision. Something slid across the bottom of the mirror. Not on the surface, behind it. It looked like a shadow at first, a long streak of darker gray that coiled and curved against the glass as if something was crawling under it, trapped between layers. I froze, toothbrush halfway to my mouth, foam dripping onto my wrist. The shadow twitched again, pressing outwards. For a moment, the mirror bulged, subtly, like something soft was pushing against it from the other side. Then it retreated. The silence after was worse than the sound. My bathroom suddenly felt smaller, the air denser. I could smell something faintly metallic, like rust and wet coins. It clung to the back of my throat. I remember backing out slowly, eyes never leaving the mirror, and sleeping that night with every light on. I told myself it was nothing, just reflections, maybe headlights from outside, maybe fatigue. But the next night, I noticed the smell again. That strange, sharp, damp scent drifting from the bathroom. And when I turned on the light, there were streaks on the mirror. Thin, irregular smudges that ran diagonally like the trace of fingertips, but too narrow, too long. They looked almost like trails left by something sliding, dragging itself upward from the corner toward the top edge. I cleaned it. I used glass cleaner until the surface squeaked under the rag. But as I wiped, I swore the streaks shimmered faintly beneath the surface, like veins beneath pale skin. That night, I stayed awake in bed, staring at the crack of light coming from under the bathroom door. It pulsed faintly, as if the light inside was dimming and brightening on its own. My pulse matched it. Then came the noise. A faint, rhythmic tap, tap, tap. Not from the pipes. Not from the floor above. It came from the mirror. I know how that sounds, but I heard it clearly. The sound of fingernails against glass. Not scratching. Tapping. Testing. I remember gripping the blanket so tight that my knuckles ached. The tapping grew more impatient. Faster. Then it stopped altogether. Silence. For a full minute, nothing. And just when I started to believe it was over, something slid. The unmistakable sound of skin against glass, slow and dragging. I didn't move for hours. I don't even remember falling asleep. But when I woke up, the apartment felt wrong. The air smelled stronger, that same metallic dampness. And when I opened the bathroom door, the mirror was fogged from the inside. There was condensation behind the glass. You can't fake that. You can't explain that. Moisture doesn't collect between a wall-mounted mirror and drywall unless there's space. Something was in there. I covered it that morning. I didn't think, I just did it, grabbed an old bedsheet, a few strips of duct tape, and sealed the entire mirror behind a layer of fabric. I didn't want to see it anymore. I didn't want it to see me. But the smell didn't go away. It deepened, became thicker. The scent of mold and rot and iron filled the small apartment, coming from behind that covered wall. I could hear faint pops sometimes, the way glass flexes under pressure. And once, when I walked past it, I felt warmth. Not from the heater. No, this was different. It was body warmth. That night, I woke to the sound of fabric shifting. The unmistakable sound of something brushing against the sheet. A faint ripple ran through it, as though fingers were dragging downward from the other side. I remember whispering, though I don't know to whom, not to look, not to uncover it, but my curiosity got the better of me. I turned on my phone's flashlight, and the beam hit the fabric. There was an outline, something tall, thin, with too many joints, pressed right up against the sheet, almost leaning forward. I could see its silhouette trembling slightly, the way muscles do when they're straining. And then its hand moved. Long, stretched fingers pressed outward, one by one, indenting the fabric like claws pushing from beneath wallpaper. The sheet tore, just a little, but through that tear, I saw the glass. And behind the glass, it was dark, but the dark wasn't empty. It shimmered faintly, like water under the moonlight. And beneath that shifting black, I saw something crawl. It wasn't a person. It wasn't even shaped like one. It had a torso that folded in unnatural ways, limbs that twisted at impossible angles, joints that clicked faintly as it moved. Its face, or what might have been a face, was smooth, featureless, except for 2 indentations where eyes should have been. It moved like a spider, fluid and deliberate, crawling across the inside of the mirror's surface as if gravity didn't apply. And when it reached the center, it stopped. Its head, or its front, turned toward me. Slowly. That was when the smell became unbearable. Thick, wet, sour. My stomach lurched while burning my throat. Then it did something I still can't unsee. It placed its hand, its pale, bone-stretched hand, flat against the inside of the glass. And right beneath where its palm pressed, the mirror sank. The surface dented inward, like the barrier between us was softening. A thin crack splintered outward from the point of contact. That's when I ran. I didn't stop to grab anything. I didn't even close the door behind me. I spent that night in my car, parked 3 blocks away, watching the dark windows of my own apartment from the street. Nothing moved. Nothing followed. The next morning, when I forced myself to return, the smell was gone. The mirror was intact. The sheet still covered it, except for the small tear I'd made. For a week, I didn't touch it. I showered at the gym. I brushed my teeth in the kitchen sink. But every night, I'd hear the faintest sound, like glass expanding under heat, like something shifting its weight behind the wall. It's been months since then. I still haven't uncovered it. I taped over the tear and hung another blanket for good measure. I try not to think about it, but sometimes late at night, I notice something strange. When I pass the covered wall, there's a faint breeze. A slow, cold draft, as if the mirror is breathing through the fabric. And once, just once, when I stood too close, I felt a pulse. A soft, rhythmic beat against the sheet. Almost like a heartbeat. I think it's still in there. And I think it's waiting for me to take the cover off. I've always been sensitive to light. Not in the way that makes you squint under the sun, but in a quieter, more peculiar way, like I can feel light move. When it flickers, I feel it inside my skin. When it fades, I sense it before my eyes even notice. It's been like that since I was a kid. My mother used to say it was because I spent too much time staring into the mirror, watching my reflection instead of the world around me. I didn't think much of it until recently. The mirror in my bathroom isn't particularly old. Just a plain, rectangular sheet with a thin black frame, the kind you can buy at any home goods store. But what's strange about it isn't how it looks, it's how it feels. It's the only object in the house that seems to have a kind of weight to it, like there's air pressing against it, pushing back when you stand too close. I noticed it the first week after moving in. The way the glass would hold on to condensation longer than it should, like it didn't want to let go. The way the reflection seemed slightly darker than the rest of the room, even with the same light. But the first real sign that something was off happened late one night. The power had gone out during a storm, the kind that makes the air feel wet even indoors. I lit a single candle and placed it on the bathroom counter while I brushed my teeth. The flame was weak, bending toward the mirror as if drawn to it. My reflection bent too, warped slightly by the flicker, but there was something behind it, a darker outline just to my left shoulder. I froze. My eyes tracked to the spot where the shape should have been, but there was nothing. Only the cold, empty corner of the bathroom. I leaned closer, my breath fogging the glass. The shadow behind me didn't move. It stayed perfectly still, its edges sharper than the candlelight should have allowed. At first, I told myself it was just a trick of the light. The candle, the steam, the tiredness. That was all it could be. But then the candle flame began to shudder, not from the air, but from something like a pulse, like a heartbeat echoing through the room. And the shadow's head, if that's what it was, tilted. I blew out the candle before I could see more. The next morning, the bathroom smelled faintly of something sour. Not mildew, not decay, but something like burnt hair. It lingered near the mirror, trapped in the still air. I scrubbed the glass clean, thinking it might help, but the reflection looked dimmer than usual, like it had lost some of its depth. That night, I covered the mirror with a towel. For a few days, that worked. The smell faded, the air lightened, and I stopped catching that faint pressure behind me whenever I brushed my teeth. But curiosity has a way of making fools out of people. One night, half asleep and half unsettled, I decided to peek. The towel came down like a curtain. The mirror looked harmless at first, cold, gray, unremarkable. But then I saw it again. That faint outline, darker than the shadows of the room. This time, it wasn't behind me. It was beside me. Its shape was wrong. Human enough to recognize, but often the small details, too narrow in some places, too broad in others. Like someone's reflection stretched across water. The outline twitched, as though adjusting its posture to match mine, but not quite. My own reflection moved when I lifted my hand. The shadow didn't. It stood still, its head turned just slightly toward me, its edges trembling like something alive beneath the surface of the glass. I remember backing away slowly, my heart hammering against my ribs. There was a low hum in my ears, not a sound exactly, but a vibration that filled the room. I turned off the light, slammed the door shut, and slept in the living room that night. But mirrors don't like being ignored. Over the next few days, I started noticing strange distortions around the house. The television screen, black and off, seemed to reflect faint movements that weren't mine. The microwave door would catch my shape wrong for half a second before correcting itself. Even my phone camera seemed to freeze a moment too long on my face when switching from front to back. It was like my reflection had developed a mind of its own, and it wanted me to notice. On the fourth night, I woke up to the faint sound of dripping water. I thought I'd left the bathroom tap on, but when I checked, the sink was dry. The sound wasn't water. It was a slow, deliberate tapping, like nails against glass. It was coming from behind the towel. I didn't move closer. I couldn't. The tapping continued for a while, methodical, patient. Then it stopped. Silence stretched so thin that I could hear my own heartbeat again. When I finally worked up the courage to yank the towel away, my reflection looked normal. No shadow, no movement, nothing. But right across the lower part of the mirror, faint lines were visible, as if someone had dragged their fingers down the inside of the glass. That was the first time I realized whatever it wasn't in the room. It was inside the mirror. After that night, I tried everything. Salt, covering it again, leaving the lights on. But it didn't matter. The reflection started changing in ways I couldn't explain. Sometimes, when I leaned in close, the background behind me would shift slightly. The tiles in the reflection would appear cracked even though they weren't. The light in the mirrored version of the room would flicker, even when the real one didn't. Once, I saw the faint silhouette of a door behind me, except my bathroom only has one door. The shadow began appearing more frequently, always just a fraction of a second too late, like it was struggling to mimic me correctly. Its movements grew more deliberate. When I tilted my head, it would turn its opposite way. When I exhaled, it leaned closer. The boundary between us felt thinner every day. Then came the whispering. It wasn't a voice, not exactly, more like breath-forming words it couldn't quite speak. I'd hear it when the faucet ran, when I brushed my teeth, when I breathed too close to the glass. Just faint enough to question whether it was real. Just clear enough to know it wasn't my imagination. It wasn't until I saw my reflection smile without me that I finally understood what it wanted. It was early morning. The first gray light of dawn had just begun to creep through the window. I was brushing my teeth, staring blankly into the mirror, when I realized my mouth had gone still, but the reflections hadn't. Its lips were curled upward, its eyes locked on mine with a cold, deliberate stillness. My body froze. Then, behind the reflection, inside the mirrored version of the room, I saw movement. The shadow that didn't belong to me stepped closer. It reached out, its fingers brushing against the other side of the glass. The surface rippled, faintly, like water disturbed by wind. And I swear I felt something on my cheek. Cold. Wet. Like fingertips pressing through from the other side. The mirror cracked that day. a single hairline fracture running diagonally across the surface, splitting the reflection in two. I left it like that. I didn't want to touch it again. But the thing is, cracked mirrors still reflect. They just distort what they show. And over the next few nights, the shadow in the glass began to change shape. It no longer tried to mimic me. It watched. Just watched. And sometimes it seemed closer. I started covering every reflective surface in the house. The TV, the windows at night, even my phone when I wasn't using it. Anything that could show me something that wasn't supposed to be there. But mirrors have a way of finding you. A few days ago, while washing dishes, I caught sight of the kitchen window and froze. It was dusk outside, but in the reflection, there was light, like a dim, flickering glow coming from behind me. My own shadow was visible in the glass, but it wasn't standing still. It moved. Slowly, deliberately, it raised its arm and pointed toward the hallway. When I turned, the hallway was dark, completely still, but the bathroom door, covered mirror and all, was slightly open. I could see the faintest glint of glass from inside, catching the last trace of light. I don't remember walking closer, but I must have, because I remember standing there, my hand trembling on the doorknob, feeling a soft vibration humming through it. A pulse, slow and steady, like the mirror itself was alive. I pulled the towel away one last time. The reflection looked wrong. The lighting didn't match. My movements were sluggish, delayed. The room behind me in the mirror looked older, dustier. The paint peeling. The air seemed heavier, as though time had shifted differently inside that surface. Then I noticed the shadow. It wasn't beside me this time. It was behind my reflection, towering over it, its head brushing the top of the frame. The edges of its form swirled like smoke, but its eyes, or the places where eyes should have been, glowed faintly like fading embers. As I watched, my reflection blinked, and the shadow didn't. It leaned down, whispering something into my reflection's ear. I couldn't hear it, but I could see the breath fog against the inside of the glass. Then my reflection smiled again. This time I didn't. The surface rippled once more, the crack running through it widening with a faint, wet sound. My reflection began to step forward, the shadow behind it pushing closer, pressing through the fractured glass like something desperate to escape. I stumbled back, knocking over the towel rack. The sound of metal clattering to the floor broke whatever trance had been holding me. I ran. Now, every mirror I pass seems to catch me differently. For a split second, my reflection lags behind. Sometimes it looks towards something over my shoulder that I can't see. Sometimes, I think I catch the faint shape of another shadow standing inside it, waiting. And sometimes, just sometimes, when the lights are low enough and the air feels still, I see my reflection smile again, even when I don't.